Hi everyone, welcome back to Side 9. I'm Fulm and Reala.
And I'm Reala.
It sure doesn't feel like it, but it's been about 3 months since the release of Set 3, Steel Requiem.
Keeping in touch with the theme about types of music, Set 4, Phantom Aria, is a primarily archetype-driven set that allows players to experiment with some cool new decks. Minerva Squad, League Militaire, a new Christmas-flavored version of Celestial Being, and they're even teaching the students at the Academy a new technique, eating your greens.
Nice one, Reala. In a break with what we've seen from Gundam sets so far, Phantom Aria is unique in that this is the first set we've seen where almost every LR is archetype-based. There are few generics to be found here. Safe to say that Gundam has begun the game of creating more and more sub-themes to further divide larger color identities into, something recognizable from other Bandai card games.
Unfortunately, other Bandai card games don't have cool-ass robots, and we here at Side 9 know what we're about. If you want to stay up to date on everything related to Gundam Card Game in particular, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel.
Keeping in tune with our most recent video of this type from Set 3, let's go over a quick lightning round to talk about some lists that we won't be giving a full spotlight to, but did get some cool new tools in this set that we thought we should give a quick mention. After that, stay tuned because we have 8 new archetypes and brews that we will give a full analysis on. First up is an updated Titans. You may notice that basically only 2 cards of this have changed from our original Mono Blue Titans list. We've supplanted Full Armor Unicorn Destroy mode with a new in-archetype Psycho Gundam Mark II, and the pilot to match it. This deck largely plays the same, we just get a little bit better in-archetype synergy simply because of the word Titan.
While an actual pile can be assembled with superpower block and UN cards this set, the synergies are soft and not really worth the cost of admission. Graham's Union Flag custom remains powerful and has cute plays featuring Soma and the Tyr and Tauzi, but for this meta, I'm keeping these cards in the binder. I'll still absolutely jam blue-white aggro though.
So this is just a value mid-range first strike, for real. Hallelujahs get you more cards while trading for free. Lock-on gets you tempo, but you have to see your links or you die. This deck obviously thrives in the mid-range, but we might have another use for red CB cards later in the video.
One of the big blessings of a generic kind of play all of the best cards you have pile, like red-white, is that we can consistently look at the current card pool and just kind of pick and choose what our flavor of the week is going to be. In this case, we're trying to get real tasty value off of Unicorn Gundam Awakened, one of our flagship LRs of the set, and basically building around Unicorn Gundam Awakened, we have a command-heavy, blocker-heavy red-white list, something that you're pretty used to at this point, probably.
A new G means we have to talk about Mafty. While this still isn't really a feature-complete archetype, the new G is good. Drawing cards is always great, so we're pairing it with the new archetype that can draw cards. But if you want to know more about V Gundam, stay tuned.
So we've gone 2 full boosters without talking about new UNE aggro, and we have a couple new cards, I suppose. We have Datra's Flyer as a new easy way to make a Datra's token. We have Burst G-Fred to have like added sack potential towards the mid to late game after you bust a few shields out. And after that, the only new GDO4 new UNE card is Gadil to cash in some breach and niche scenarios.
This set gave us a pretty strong combo enabler in Gun Cannon 08 and 09, which allows us to set up a level 4 or higher white-based team unit and set it as active. Most of the time this means that we're going to hit starter LR, RX-78 on a curve, and then following it up with the ability to turn it into a double strike on the next turn. However, we also get a new RX-78 that has high maneuver on link, which means that we can even curve blockers on this play. The list here is mono blue, playing a larger variety of every white-based team unit, but I can also see a build splashing white that has less overall white-based team synergy but has a more powerful overall game plan.
So this Minerva Squad list I consider to be a worse deck than the one that we will feature in our main overview here, but building up to a Destiny Gundam while setting up a Luna Maria link to soak all of the damage it would receive in other cases is an interesting play pattern, so I at the very least want to feature a deck that has Luna Maria as one of the pilots here. So Minerva Squad goes in for more archetype synergy, still has all the impulse and stuff like that, but for a deck that I consider to be better overall, stay tuned.
I may not be the biggest Destiny fan, but it does have a best girl in Luna. Speaking of Destiny, we have one last entry of the lightning round. Breaking from a normal format, this isn't a deck so much as just a really funny little card. Destined Battle is one of those commands because it allows you to fade a turn, because it forces your opponent to target what you want them to target. And luckily, we can combine that with cute cards like Zaku 2 FZ, which is immune to combat damage while its tokens are alive. Even though this particular play gets blown out by ping and isn't necessarily meta relevant, I'm sure everybody could see the potential ceiling on a card like this.
The card's very silly, if nothing else.
And with the chaff out of the way, it's time to get to the meat and potatoes. Let's get in with our first big LR-based deck in Destiny Gundam.
Funny story here. This is the upgraded version of Minerva Squad or Destiny Gundam or Impulse Gundam, whatever you want to call it. We posted the video for Starter Deck 9 on the Thursday before release. And we were looking at each other, Fulm and I were looking at each other, and we were just going, there's no way that they were revealing Destiny Gundam on the day that this starter deck comes out. Turns out that that's exactly what they did. They revealed Destiny Gundam on the day that the starter deck comes out. It's actually really good. Let's go over this Destiny Gundam real quick. So it's a level 7/5 cost with 5 AP and 5 HP. It has high maneuver naturally. And then during pair, when it swings, you get to pay the cost of a Minerva Squad unit in your trash to then deploy it. So that means that you get to replay basically any of your Impulse Gundams. You get to replay Savior Gundam if you're in red, which this deck is. And even if you get 2 Destiny Gundams in there in Magical Christmas Land scenarios, you can play another Destiny Gundam off your Destiny Gundam because it doesn't have a stipulation that means that you can't. So this is kind of the top end that we were looking for when it comes to Minerva Squad, but we basically have everything else lining up for the deck for us, including that Impulse Gundam package that we talked about in our initial starter deck overview for this deck as well.
Yeah, speaking of that Impulse package, looking at the list, I do see something that I think is a little different than a lot of the early Destiny builds that I've seen. Cards on the table, a choice I support very much. We're only running 2 base Impulse Gundam.
Yeah, so this is an interesting choice for sure. Impulse Gundam was a card that was very heavily valued when this deck was in starter deck format. However, of course, as we just went over, we have this Destiny Gundam that kind of fulfills the role later in the game that an Impulse Gundam would be giving you, basically recurring Minerva Squad units from the trash, and even the Impulse Gundams that base Impulse Gundam can tag out into. And so really all that it's doing here is that we want to be able to do the kind of quasi loop play where you get to play an Impulse Gundam, it will die over the course of the game. You play the Force Impulse Gundam. The Force Impulse Gundam will then salvage your base Impulse Gundam from the trash to then play the Impulse Gundam again and then tag out into the Force Impulse Gundam again. So that's a lot of words, but basically the idea is that you are going into Force Impulse Gundam twice, and then when Force Impulse Gundam dies for the second time, you are getting a second Minerva Squad card from your trash back to your hand, representing a card advantage plus, similar to something like a Show of Resolve. The problem with playing Impulse Gundam in multiples, typically 4 copies as we see in a lot of lists, is that it is worse on rate than basically like the Rezel clone that we typically talk about. Of course, it has the Minerva Squad trait and things like that. But a lot of times, with the way that this deck curves out and plays its game, we're not going to be able to cash in multiple Impulse Gundam tagouts because it's 2 cost every single time you activate it. So basically we're thinning a little bit on the base Impulse Gundam so we can afford the ability to do it at least once throughout the game. But again, Impulse Gundam in multiples doesn't actually do a whole lot for you, and we'd rather fill those slots in with other things, such as the 4th Legao to basically combat aggro decks in the field, and then also another Sword Impulse Gundam, because we actually have a little bit more application for Sword Impulse Gundam in this version of the deck as opposed to the starter deck version of the deck, because Destiny Gundam can revive it, we can kill, Lifriths and Ricdiuses and things like that. And then also, of course, just having that sneaky last minute link for when we need to be winning the game or trying to go for shields ASAP is also a way to do it.
Yeah, oftentimes I've found, especially once we start getting past turn 8, turn 9, sometimes the way you just win the game is you link a Destiny, revive that Sword Impulse, and then whatever other pilot you have in your hand just links to your Sword Impulse to get that last hit in.
Yeah, it's kind of what Justice Gundam has been wanting to do this entire time and somehow haven't really found a way to make work. But I guess in this deck you just need one more pilot and somehow you're live, right? It's actually funny too that it's happening in a deck that is also playing Athranzala. Let's talk a little bit about the purple removal suite. So of course we're still on Savior Gundam. This deck, as red purple, is geared a little bit more towards assuming that we're playing against aggro decks. There is an alternate version of this deck that is playing white instead of red, that you could argue probably has a little bit more ground to stand on if we're playing against more mid-range and control decks in the field. But basically we have Look of Determination, Fatal Strike, Giant Killing. These are all purple kill on sight commands that have a little bit of restrictions when it comes to what we can actually kill. So for example, Look Determination is active level 2 or lower, but it can scale if you get 10 or more cards in trash. Fatal Strike is just that classic level 3 or lower, get rid of. And then Giant Killing is main or action timing active unit that is 4 AP or lower. So there's definitely some hoops and conditions here, but the idea is that if we're playing these in the early game, we can then fuel the 5 purple cards needed for Savior Gundam, and then you can go for this really big board clear plus breach plus kill whatever is remaining with your Atherin Link, because you can now attack active units and kind of clear the way there. And the idea is that when we're doing this Savior Gundam play, we're kind of clearing the way for when we go for our Destiny Gundam Link, hopefully on the following turn, which then means that Destiny Gundam is kind of facing against an open field on the opponent's side of the field. So hopefully we can be able to activate that Destiny Gundam on attack trigger again on the following turn. That's going to be the absolute value cap out play with Destiny Gundam here if we're going to be able to activate it twice. I think that's just really, really good value. Again, gives you more and more cards that the opponent doesn't really have a good idea of dealing with, and all the while doing high maneuver swings. So if they even happen to have a blocker, there's definitely a guaranteed shield that's going through there.
Yeah, combined with the fact that Destiny Gundam is obviously big enough to break through any base on its own. Once linked, it is an 8/5.
Yep. So, of course, this deck isn't without weaknesses. This is actually one thing that Fulm and I have talked about when getting the Destiny reveal. Something that, is interesting because we see community conversation about Destiny Gundam, and I think a lot of people are really, really good at queuing into what makes this deck really, really good in the first place. Just that, or I guess the card really good in the first place, which is, again, that value-centered revive stuff on attack. However, we take a look at the card that it's supposed to be linking with Shin Asuka, and we are getting 8 AP and 5 HP. And yeah, 5 HP, especially at level 7, that's not a whole lot of effort needed to clear Destiny Gundam. So what could typically be seen in a vacuum is like, oh yeah, this is some infinite value generating machine where you can just keep on reviving stuff. It actually turns out that 5 HP is not that hard to clear, and especially for like a kill on sight lightning rod like Destiny Gundam, kind of like how we see First Form earlier in the game, where you just need to kill this card, otherwise your opponent might just run away with the game in terms of value. 5 HP is not that tall of an ask, especially for these cards that basically lightning rod removal from your opponent.
The other issue is that due to how Destiny itself presents threat, nothing else in the deck commands removal as much as Destiny does, so it's not like your opponent is that pressured to spend their answers on earlier cards as well.
Right. Overall, this particular build of the deck does struggle a little bit more against control. Of course, because we have these 12 purple removal spells that are a little bit more narrow in their use case, we then run into scenarios where, okay, well, if we have a bunch of Look at Determinations in hand, the opponent's curve starts at Lifriths and Rick Diaz, which are level 3 units. Okay, well, these Look at Determinations are basically just going to sit in the hand until, later in the game. And then, of course, yeah, that just kind of spirals the problem further. We don't have a whole lot of early gameplay. The Legao plus Shin, funny quote-unquote unintended interaction doesn't do a whole lot versus the control decks because they have heavier level and costs. Again, another thing that presumably the white-purple version of this deck would be a lot better at doing. But again, we're building this assuming that we're going to be playing against aggro. That's kind of been the popular bread and butter of Gundam card game metagame so far. And so far in GDO4, it seems like there's not going to be a whole lot of moving the needle in terms of metagame impact, and of course that's what we're speculating right now, but it seems like aggro is basically here to stay as a relevant and very well-worn archetype in Gundam card game.
I do think it's fair to say I think the booster overall is going to open the gate a little wider for your mid-range and control decks. Aggro is going to take up less of the overall pie. Mm-hmm. However, that doesn't mean aggro is now bad. You're still going to see plenty of it being played, especially because blue-purple is still extremely relevant, and so a bunch of people have already built that deck to play it this format, so they will continue to play it next format.
Yep. So that's kind of where the weakness of this deck lies overall. Playing against control, we are much more reliant on seeing our links and then not seeing fatal strikes and lack of determinations and multiple copies clogging up your hand, not being able to do much in terms of plays. But overall, yeah, I mean, if you're able to land a good Destiny Gundam or two and just kind of continue accruing the value over that, over the course of several turns and maybe protect them with blast impulses, you can definitely be in the game against control, but it's definitely not what we want to be seen on the other end of the table from us.
If this deck starts running into a lot of control, I mean, there's a lot of modularity in this deck. You won't run this particular build, but there are plenty of changes that you can make to make your control matchup way better. Some of that is just dropping red in exchange for the white package.
But overall, I do think that Minerva Squad has some legs to stand on. Is it this particular build of red-purple? I think the answer mainly just depends on how much aggro we're going to be seeing in the following format. Legao plus Shin is definitely no joke against aggro. I think aggro really sweats quite a bit seeing that across the table from them. But of course, like Fulm just pointed out, there is a whole lot of modularity in changing the deck and things like that. So if it's not this particular variant of Minerva Squad, I have confidence that there is going to be some level of meta relevance for a deck that is playing these purple cards, for example, Force Impulse and Destiny Gundam and shit and things like that. So I think this deck will definitely find a place in the metagame, if not a top tier meta contender. We'll put it that way. Alright, so we have a new blue archetype in set 4 in Gundam Card Game, and it seems to be pretty good. I would wager to say that it may lead you towards victory in a lot of games in Gundam Card Game. Let's go ahead and talk about this new brew featuring, you guessed it, Victory Gundam.
That was a terrible pun.
Oh, the channel just keeps on getting worse, Fulminatus, but I'm here for the roller coaster.
Sub count goes up and quality goes down.
The way of YouTube, unfortunately.
But yeah, so we're very excited for Victory as an archetype. The League Militaire trait, surprisingly, is probably one of the most competent out-of-the-box archetypes that we've seen. So many decks that have been pushed to being hard archetype focused in the past have needed like 2, sometimes 3 boosters to really get off the ground. Some archetypes now still aren't even real archetypes so much as they just have really powerful packages inside them. We talk about things like Tekkadan, but even then Tekkadan's a really soft archetype that side decks into being very heavy Tekkadan to make Lupus play. Otherwise we're just using, Adapt and First Form, right?
Right, and it's we've had a couple archetypes throughout Gundam Card Game's lifespan so far. We've had Clan, which historically has struggled quite a bit, and we have CB as well, which Bandai seems to have thrown in the towel at least slightly, where we had the purple-green Celestial Being list from the original starter deck, and now not even one full set later, I guess exactly one set later, they are now throwing in the towel on the green-purple build of Celestial Being and now supporting a red-green build of Celestial Being. And thankfully, we don't really have to worry about this deck's archetype cards being spread out through about 3 different colors, I guess, because all of the League Militaire cards are here in arguably one of the best colors in Gundam Card Game, blue.
I think at this point it's not even arguable. I think based on results alone, blue has proven itself to be the strongest color overall.
Oh, sorry, let me retake that. Gundam Card Game's best color, blue.
But having said all that, to get into what the deck itself does, it's very funny. We call this Victory Gundam, but almost no part of this deck is individually wrapped around one card. We just went over Minerva Squad, which is Destiny Gundam deck, right? Everything that you're doing in that deck is building up to this game plan of Destiny winning you the game. That's not how this deck works. We have base form Victory Gundam, a level 4, 3 cost, 3/4, so we're on starter RX-78 stats that says if you have other League Militaire units, when it attacks, draw a card. And draw a card on swing. I don't think we need to get into too deep of why that is an absolutely insane line of text to have on a card.
It is absolutely flabbergasting, by the way, that this card does not require a pair or a link. It just does it.
It just does
attack, it just does it.
And not only does it just do it, but speaking of pairs and links, it also doesn't care what pilot you put on it as long as it has the right trait. We have a flagship unit that just goes, yeah, man, it just has to be in my clan. And so that in and of itself creates a really fun environment where a lot of Victory's archetype pieces become interchangeable. So we already have that value. But of course, how do we get multiple League units into play? Well, the other side of this archetype, and this is a line of text you'll see on several of the cards on screen, is make a League Militaire parts token where you make a 1/1 token that can't swing at your opponent. Now, not swinging at your opponent is absolutely a drawback. I mean, part of the reason Zawart isn't that threatening of an early game unit is because since it can't swing at you, you could just let it live on the board and you don't have to worry about it till you start swinging your own units at your opponent. However, being able to make a nigh infinite factory of little 1/1 idiots till your opponent's units just die to them is incredibly powerful.
Because it turns out that if your parts tokens are dealing with the opponent's units, then your actual units that you're actually, fielding and deploying and playing and actually, have real stat line outside of just the +1/+1, right, from the parts, right? Those can then start targeting the shields, right? So it's almost like you're playing the little decoy tokens to then do the board clearing and the trading, so your other units can go ahead and go for those shields, which definitely provides a lot of value over the course of the game.
Something that has been consistently demonstrated throughout the life of this game over these past 4 boosters. Ping is really powerful, like just dealing 1 damage to something and it not really costing you anything other than some resources is a good thing to be doing. Well, ramming a little 1/1 into it is pinging something for 1. However, this deck just gets to keep doing that. It's not oh hey, we deploy, we get a token once. We are consistently putting out other tokens and even some of our effects that are designed to benefit off of having our tokens, such as V-Dash, which is an extremely powerful card for closing out a game. Even if you don't have the tokens, you can always just cash in a lower level League Militaire normal unit in order to get your rest, slam into it, and get your breach.
Right, and one thing I love about this archetype just overall is that it's not the most locked archetype thing in the world, and of course, as you see in this list, we are seeing everyone's good old favorite starter deck 1 RX-78 LR, playing Amro as well, and just seeing the synergy between, the League Militaire cards plus Amro, just Amro pairing to literally any one of them, going in for a trade, going into the uncommon Victory Gundam, pairing to Amro, it getting destroyed, playing a token, allows you to set up a trade that way. So there's definitely some soft synergy between the cards in this deck that aren't necessarily League Militaire in the first place as well.
One of the things that I think is really cool about this is, as you mentioned, Victory Gundam LR doesn't need to be paired or anything to fire off. So if you put an Amuro on that, you can still get your cards out of it. Hexa does need to be paired, but it doesn't care about the traits of its pair. V-Dash doesn't require a pilot, although it does link with Uso, so generally we want to make sure that we're hitting our Uso on it.
Yes, very, very link agnostic of an archetype for sure. You can kind of just play those pairs and links in basically whatever order, and it's going to basically yield you dividends over the course of a game, which I think is really, really helpful.
As you brought up, one of the big powers of this deck is that it is very link agnostic. In fact, generally speaking, our units don't particularly care what pilot they're paired with, and our most stringent pilot here is Uso himself, who has to be on a League Militaire unit in order for his ability to fire and give you your parts token.
But only on pair, so yeah, not that restrictive necessarily.
Yeah. And he doesn't care what league unit he's on, he just needs to be on a league unit. And so that means that if we're pairing him with our uncommon Victory Gundam, our level 3 that doesn't even link, you still get your parts token.
Yeah. One thing that's been on my mind throughout this whole entire discussion, though, because unfortunately, every Gundam card game deck has to have a weakness. We say it every single one of these videos. But, we have all these ways to deploy these tokens, quite a few of them. Victory Gundam needs 3 or more League Militaire units in play in order to proc the draw 1. So it becomes the real question of, okay, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the best deck of the previous format, Blue-Purple Aggro, which has playset of Guntank, playset of Angsha, playset of Adapt and Mikazuki. Do we ever run into these scenarios where our deck just kind of fails to function because the opponent is too good at pinging away our parts tokens?
Absolutely, it's 100% a concern, because what really lets you generate advantage in the game is generating these extra units and thus getting extra benefit off of having them. So if they get pinged away immediately, you're playing with vanilla stats. Now, I will say that one thing that really pushes League above a lot of other archetypes is if we look at our stat lines, generally speaking, our League units are on rate and making tokens. Like, the trade-off is that your token can't swing at your opponent, so the token itself is what ate all the downside of having the extra effect. So that does mean that when we are in scenarios where your tokens get pinged away, You're not absolutely screwed because your units can still fight at rate, which means if your opponent ever lets off the throttle while you're behind, you can easily crack back into the game. And a huge part of what really pushes this archetype forward is, again, you get that little bit of breathing room. Suddenly you're making units, suddenly V-Dash can make a really good trade because it rests a token that you don't care about to crack what's giving your opponent the most value. You're still getting your shield pressure, and then as that board moves back to parity, well, you've got a card that says draw cards on it.
Absolutely. And, just to kind of tie up the whole entire archetype here for Victory, it seems to me that Core Fighter is doing a whole lot of work as well, because you can kind of blank the opponent's attacks, deal some damage with your parts tokens, and it's giving the whole entire field, or all the unit tokens that you have, they get blocker. And so you're able to basically treat them as little ping commands that happen during the opponent's turn during action timing, I guess is the best way to look at it. And you can blink attacks, do a little bit of damage, and then, of course, have your other units going for the kill when it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest advantage of Core Fighter by itself is if it isn't answered and you are able to make tokens, you can fade attacks, which creates a nice advantage of one, Core Fighter itself gets to persist because something swings at it and you trade in a token to block, so that way tokens you make in the future can continue blocking. It also means that your Victory Gundam potentially lives an extra turn. Living an extra turn is an extra card.
All right, Fulminatus. So 43 cards in this deck are blue. Most of them are archetype specific. But of course, we have the second color in Gundam Card Game. We have a 7-card green splash. Can you tell me what in the heck these cards are doing in this deck and what roles they serve throughout the game?
So, funnily enough, we will actually go in reverse order of the most specific corner shot to the cards that I think are just generic good. So we'll start with Over the River and Through the Woods. Over the River and Through the Woods is a 1-cost ping command. This inherently is powerful. I say that, I don't even have to start telling you damage numbers yet. Everybody's like, ooh, okay, we're dealing damage for 1 resource. How much damage are we dealing? And the answer to that is it's variable based on how many unit tokens you have in play. But we make a lot of unit tokens. And so I think opening the door to that opportunity to get 2 unit tokens into play, which is not a hard ask in this deck, and just say, okay, cool, for 1 resource to the card, I'm going to ping for 2.
Better
That's
close
just
combat.
Inherently powerful. That's 50% off on a close combat. And of course, if we ever wind up in an environment where we're making 3 or 4 tokens, suddenly we're dealing 3 or 4 damage for 1 resource. And that is a rate that is extremely difficult to beat. I would not be surprised as this deck gets solved going forward. My cheeky little tech here finds its way out of the deck. But for now, especially because this is a new archetype, people are going to struggle to really play against how it's strong until they learn to play against the deck. This is a hilarious way to get a ton of advantage in the deck. Now, this card is absolutely a pet card, but the upside of it is extremely notable. The biggest downside to your tokens, if you make a lot of them, is your opponent can absolutely look at you and be like, I'm going to play a lot of high value units and I'm just going to pretend like your tokens don't exist because they literally can't kill me. So what do? We play Kikaroga, and those tokens have breach now, and by trading them on your board, suddenly the tokens can threaten shield. This is a hilarious way to punish your opponent for letting you have a lot of tokens.
Now they're actually doing the thing that they literally say they can't do, which is go for shields. It turns out if they have breach, they can go for shields.
Yeah, and you would be amazed how many times you get to do funny things. Like, you'll just trade off 2 1/1 tokens into a 2/1/2/2, but you traded 2 virtual cards for a real card and a shield hit in an archetype that has a card that says draw cards.
I would take that exchange any day of the week. Absolutely.
As much as I would love to potentially push the meme even further and put a Chalia Bull in this deck in order to make level 3s and lowers come in rested except for your tokens, that starts taking up too much space, and we start getting away from the idea of like, oh yeah, it just gives a further buff to our little 1/1 tokens. And then the final card, which is realistically the card that most belongs here, is Zeong. Now, Zeong has a little less value in this deck as compared to the natural progression of like a 1-year war deck because we don't have a Char Aznable, but Amuro is still a new type, and even if we don't have our new type pair, Zeong makes 2 additional tokens. This is just so many stats packed into one card that if you're going to level 6 and you're playing green and you have spare slots, I think that there's no brainer to just put this in your deck, especially if you're playing an aggressive build. Nothing is more choking than finally reaching a level of parity against an aggro deck, and then you kill one of their units and 3 more units just pop out of it.
Yep. It's like a piñata that keeps on bursting and like having stuff that kind of flows out of it. Yep.
Yeah, like you start turning the corner, they play their second Corsica base, they make 2 unit tokens, and you go, I actually don't have a way to immediately kill those. The 1/1 is going to be the death of me.
Yep. So yeah, so overall, very, very interesting archetype. I'm looking forward to sleeving it up, getting my boxes, going forward for the set release, and playing a Victory Gundam variant of some kind. How are you feeling in terms of just your confidence in the deck? Do you think that this will be a metagame player going forward? It will have to break into the meta, struggles too much against ping to really have it be able to face against the competition? How are you feeling?
While the deck itself definitely has some struggles and some weaknesses into ping, I think potentially how the meta shifts going forward, will open the door more to ping itself being challenged in its place in the meta, potentially lowering the amount of ping decks we see across the board. You'll always have your bad matchups, but given what this deck does in its matchup spreads, I think as an individual archetype, this is probably the strongest we'll see a deck come out as a brand new deck. I think that potentially even, right? Yeah, even if this isn't like the next best deck of the meta, I definitely think that this is something that we will probably see in top 8s.
And for a brand new archetype, I feel like that is more than we have been asking over the course of Gundam Card Game thus far. So seems like it's landing in a pretty soft spot overall as being a brand new archetype in set 4.
Absolutely. I do not think having your LR pulls on a box be spent on Victory Gundams is a waste.
Drawing cards is good.
But with that out of the way, talking about the classic blue-green, it's time to get to our other classic blue pair. What have you got for us today on our new blue-white build?
Oh boy, this one is a bit of a doozy, and I'm sure that everyone watching at home will see that shine through with our deck list that we're seeing, with perhaps the first ever case of being able to play 8 copies of a pilot in a Gundam Card Game deck. Of course, we have seen this phenomenon as well with Suletta Mercury in the Dohna full deck that you could play 4 of the green Suletta and then 4 of the white Suletta. Once you see that deck list later, we have opted not to, but in this deck, I think it is absolutely correct to go for the 8 Riddy. So let's go over quickly what this deck is doing early game, because most Gundam Card Game decks are going to have to build their deck around, or at least part of their deck around, just assuming that we're going to be playing against a swarm of 2/1/2/2s and Rizels and maybe Gundam Arc 78s and all that good stuff. Blue aggro package. Yep, let's go ahead and do it. So we now have a Zawart that is in blue, which is good, because once we get into our Norn LR later in the deck tech, we're going to see that we actually need a whole lot of blue cards in order to be able to fuel that card's ability. So anytime we can choose to make something blue, let's go ahead and make something blue in this deck. That's why you're seeing not a whole. So yeah, typical Zawart stats. You know, it's a blocker, it's a 3/2. It can't swing directly at the opponent's face, but that's okay. Delta plus Wave Rider mode has been in the game since set 2. I feel like it's finally finding a home here again as the anti-aggro piece that this overall late game heavy, high level and cost control build is building towards. And of course, it is just a 2 AP 3 HP unit at level 3 and 2 costs that has Repair 2 in its text. And so if you're able to go for a very early link and you draw the blue Riddy with Delta plus Wave Rider mode, you are getting a 4 AP 4 HP Repair 2 unit, again starting at level 3, turn 3 of the game. And that basically can just do a whole lot for you. It can start clearing out 2/1/2/2s. Of course, Lord help them if they're still playing Strike Daggers or anything else with 3 AP. And you can comfortably heal back down after you do this play. It's also the reason why we're playing Gun Cannon here. Repair 1, Riddy still gives the stat pump here when you go ahead and pair with Gun Cannon. So again, some good early board trade things. Rezo just for typical, stats and just having a good stat line on the board early on in the game. We're also seeing Delta Plus make a comeback here because it is just a generic Earth-fed link. So of course, another good stat stick, being able to control the board. We can pair it with either the blue Riddy or the white Riddy, and that happens at level 4. So again, all of this stuff, all of these cards that I'm just, going through one by one are mainly to give us a presence early game, be able to fill the yard with more and more blue cards, and so we can finally go into Banshee Norn.
Pray tell, what is Banshee Norn?
So Banshee Norn is a level 7 5 cost unit with 5 AP and 5 HP. It has during link, and of course the link was with Riddy, so this is a very, very important part of the deck. You absolutely need to be able to do this link play. Another reason why we're playing the 8 copies of Riddy. It's not going to be very often that you're missing this on your level 7 turn. But it's an activate main. You can exile 3 blue cards from your trash and then set this unit as active, and then it can't choose the enemy player as its attack target during this turn. It also has a flat on attack trigger that all enemy units get AP -1 during this turn. Now I know what you may be thinking. Did I forget to say that this during link ability is once per turn? No, I did not. So if you have 6 blue cards in your yard, you could go ahead and reactive this unit twice. If you have 9, you can do it 3 times, so on and so forth. And of course, the on attack trigger will then scale with the amount of times that your Banshee Norn destroy mode is going to be able to swing. So the first time, you're most likely going to be going in at shield or their base, because of course you can't attack the enemy player after you do the first swing, after you reactivate it for the first time. So you go for the base or shield first. Everything gets AP -1. All right, so you then exile the 3 blue cards, you reactive, you go ahead and swing at something on their board. The AP -1 happens again, so now they're at AP -2 in total. Do that. So basically, you set up your entire board, assuming all their cards are rested. You set up this entire feasting phase where you're basically just having an all-you-can-eat buffet from your board to theirs. You show them all the love, you give them AP -1, you debuff them like crazy, and then hopefully once all the dust settles, you get to keep all of your cards, all of their cards are gone, and it creates a tempo/value like board state swing akin to something like the O decks of the previous meta are able to do. So very, very strong play pattern in and of itself.
And of course, we say, we're looking for 9 blue cards in our trash so we can restand our Banshee Norn 3 times and just clear out your opponent's board, and that's absolute pie in the sky. We are winning the game off that play. But it is worth noting that Banshee Norn still absolutely works, just reactivating itself once per turn cycle, and then next turn you get 2 more blue cards in your trash to make sure that you get up to the 3 you need to just reactivate it again. Being able to get 2 swings out of it a turn can become just an insurmountable value add, right?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, I realize that I haven't even gone over what the white Riddy does, because this is honestly, it might just be the best Riddy overall, but definitely the one that you want to be linking with your destroy mode, because the blue Riddy is only synergistic with repair. But basically, this is an attempt that Bandai is making at anti-ping within the game. I think it's really cool design space, but basically it is a +1/+2 pilot at level 4 1 cost, so pretty typical, except, the typical AP and HP values are flipped there. But when this unit receives effect damage from an enemy, you reduce it by 2. So basically, exactly as Fulm has pointed out here, we can make our Banshee Norn 7 HP. Yes, 7 HP. It is resistant to ping damage by 2 every single time it gets pinged. And so what's happening here is that because it is a sticky card, that it has AP- ability on swing, it has anti-ping, attached to it, and it has just a high HP pool to begin with. Not even talking about how we're playing Devour in this deck, so we can then heal it off if it ever does take damage in combat. It's very possible that your Norn Destroy mode just stays on the board, and then of course if you are going to the turn with your Norn Destroy mode linked, then honestly, I just don't think there's any hope for the opponent at that point. That is the absolute win condition of this deck, I think.
But having said all that, Norn isn't the only unicorn we have, is it?
It is not. So we have Unicorn Gundam Awakened, one of my favorite LRs of the set. It is a pretty simple, but yet very powerful level 7 5 cost unit with 4 AP and 6 HP. It has generic suppression, so of course it clears out 2 shields when it attacks. Then when you activate the main or action effect of a command, you get to choose an enemy unit and it gets AP -2 during this turn. So very important to note, these are incredibly synergistic with each other. Of course, if Norn isn't dealing with all of the AP that you could possibly minus in a turn cycle, then if you just get a command and play it off with the Unicorn Gundam Awaken, then that sets up even more free trades for Norn, as if that was even possible. And then of course, the generic suppression allows you to get closer on shield parity, because earlier in the game, absolutely, we are going for those early trades and trying to sustain the game to be able to get into our heavier cards. So it would be really reasonable to think that we would be behind on shields at that point in the game. So of course, suppression will catch you right back up. So these two are very, very synergistic with each other. And of course, if you're able to land that Norn and then have it live, like I said earlier in this video, if you play that Unicorn Gundam Awaken, that basically seals the deal in the entire game.
And I think the other deal is that one really tends to compensate for the other, and they both kind of actually do feed into each other, because Norn actually does struggle a little bit to kill your opponent due to its restanding largely being focused on controlling the board. So what do you do about that? Well, you use Awaken to suppress. We need to make sure that we are feeding the yard so we can activate our Norns. Well, just hard playing a bunch of commands can actually get us behind on value, because the commands in and of themselves don't advance your board state. So Awaken comes in to give us negative AP, which means what we do have on board now just essentially gets freed up in its trades. So I do think it's really interesting how both of these cards like feed each other, and having them both together makes each of them stronger than they would be individually.
Yeah, it's definitely really cool. And of course, let's talk about those commands as well, because we're in blue and white. Nothing is super, super impressive. But of course, you know, we have some cantrips and Overflowing Affection and Kind-Hearted. We have another cool anti-aggro tool and Graceful Demeanor. A lot of people are really hyping this one up overall, just seeing the community sentiment. But you can, at action timing, at level 4 for 2 costs, you can choose 1 to 2 enemy units that are level 3 or lower and return them to the owner's hands. So, you know, this covers a lot. It covers First Forms, it covers Lifrith, it covers Rick Diaz, of course it covers anything that's lower in level, so like level 2, level, you know, 2/1/2/2s, things like that. And then of course just a couple of copies at the Show of Resolve to really wrap everything together. So we're dealing with cantrips or tempo plays that allow the opponent's clock to slow down a little bit, or just overall value pluses. But these are all there to basically be not that detrimental overall to your deck's game plan and digging for pieces. And of course, the real cherry on top to all of these commands is, what if these commands also had choose an opponent's unit gets AP -2 during this turn on top of it? All of these cards then read like they're really, really good. They're pretty decent cards already, but of course you add AP -2 to an opponent's unit onto literally any command in the game, it's going to be reading a whole lot better than what it typically would be.
Yeah, especially since you're resolving all these commands at main speed. So what's usually happening is you're going, okay, AP -2, and then Norn goes sideways, it goes AP -1 on top of that. And there are several units in this game that go from very real trade considerations to I'm swinging at these for free by just giving them -3 AP.
I can't believe this is the second time I'm saying this during this deck list segment, by the way, but also Unicorn's command ability of main and action effects, AP -2, all that good stuff, not once per turn either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're just like running wild. We're just running wild if we ever get there.
And then just to bandwagon really quickly on Graceful Demeanor, the best feeling in the world is looking at a chump blocker late in the game and just being like, yeah, put the Rick Diaz back in your hand, and now suppression hits face.
Yeah, it happens at action timing too, so definitely exactly how you want it to end up.
And then, of course, there is one other card here that I think is pretty interesting, largely just because I think this card got talked up a lot, and then we saw nothing of it, and that is Devour Your Base.
Yeah, so typical base fare, level 3 1 cost, has 5 HP. It then says activate main. Once per turn, you can peg 2 of your resources to choose a unit and recover 2 HP. So of course, that's a relatively big resource sink. It's not something that you want to be doing, you know, all the time, but you know, sometimes it helps shore up your combat math. It helps your card live for longer. I think most of the time you're going to be using it on your, you know, Unicorn Gundam Banshee Norn Destroy mode to just have it stick around, because obviously we're really, really invested in the idea of having us start the next turn with it still on board. But other than that, you know, it's just standard base fare. If you don't ever use it, you know, you're never too upset about just having a standard vanilla 5 HP base. But when you do get to use it, it feels like an absolute blowout scenario.
Yeah, especially because due to it being piloted by Riddy, Norn's breakpoints are just so brutal. It becomes a card that, so many times it's like, okay, I'm willing to commit 2 cards to kill this card that's going to outvalue me. It is this unit and, in improved technique. Improved technique doesn't do that here.
So there are, like I said with the Minerva Squad deck list earlier in this video, this one also has several different builds that you can go for. There's one that Fulm has been playing in his testing that plays more Unicorn Gundam Destroy mode from set 1 and also goes for the playset of Banashir replacing the blue Riddies. So that's definitely a route that I think this deck could go down. We're tuning this deck to assume aggro because that's kind of been a safe bet, from Gundam Card Game's inception to now. But suppose that we end up in a more control style environment where the Delta Plus Wave Rider mode isn't that appreciated, or, your Blues Award isn't really doing a whole lot other than just chumping and dying towards something that's a higher level in cost. There are multiple build paths on this deck to where if we want to be playing more against control, where we think that high level and costs are going to be the norm, not the Norn in this meta, we get to play Unicorn Gundam Destroy mode from set 1, be able to set those cards to resting and be able to control the board even harder. And of course on Banashir as a pilot too, being able to refuel itself as you attach it to one of your Unicorn Gundams, and you get to even have the link with your suppression too. So overall, if we're thinking that there's just going to be higher levels and costs within the game, and we're going to be playing against more control, there is definitely a good build path to then alter this deck, keep the Norn Destroy mode, keep the Awaken in there, maybe get rid of this game's early game, or not necessarily get rid of, but, maybe play a lot less to then supplement with more high level and cost cards to be able to deal with an abundance of control if that's where the metagame leans.
Yeah, and just also to speak to your point, when we're playing more of a forecasted game as opposed to observing how the game is currently being played, we tend to err more on the side of it's better to be not prepared to face control than it is to be not prepared to face aggro, because not being prepared to face aggro just means that you will lose before your deck has any chance to stabilize, whereas a control deck will give you a little bit of time to cobble a game plan together. So we've spent a lot of time talking about what synergies this deck has and what it's really good at. However, I definitely sat with you through a lot of testing. There are some things that this deck is bad at. Do we want to go over those?
It's very easy in Magical Christmas Land to imagine the scenario where Norn just does everything for you, hands it to you on a silver platter, it gets to eat its buffet, and then, it's just done with it, right? However, one thing that's really, really weak about this deck is just what if your opponent knows what Norn does and just sets up a whole bunch of active units and just hoards their hand towards the end of the game where they just want to kill you and deal 4 shields plus the final hit in one go. We have no way to rest those active units. So suppose the opponent, just hoards a bunch of 2/1/2/2s or whatever, they're just playing aggro, they're just okay, cool, where I'm just gonna sit back here and have you do your control thing, and you're not fast enough to actually kill me on time, and I'm not gonna let you get your value off of Norn, you're gonna play it down, and then in response to that, on my following turn, I'm gonna play 2/1/2/2, 2/1/2/2, Rezel, 2/1/2/2, insert something else here, right? Alright, cool. That is not very good for us because we have no reliable way to deal with that many cards getting played all at once, and Norn doesn't rest anything, and at that point we're kind of sweating because basically the entire thing that we're building up our deck for is kind of in vain. Now, of course, we do have low ends, that can help us speed up the clock if we need to, but if the opponent's perceptive enough to know what our deck is doing and then counterplays, particularly on a smart basis where they know what our deck is doing and they're trying to counterplay as hard as they possibly can, this deck definitely runs into some challenges.
Yeah, and I think another big note too is it is a little bit vulnerable to what I like to call the bigger idiot problem, which is if your opponent just has the bigger idiot on board than you have, you can run into big problems, because while minus AP is incredibly powerful and can open up an incredible amount of value, especially with Norn swinging multiple times, it's not first strike. So Norn doesn't really have a great way to deal with a big guy who's just going to swing at it for 7 when it hasn't had the opportunity to swing first.
Yeah, so definitely some real weaknesses that are happening in this deck. However, I think the overall, just the plays, the intended interactions, the playing with the little cantrip commands and being able to AP minus wherever you can, and then playing board control in the early game. This is definitely a new. It feels fresh, but also feels pretty same old with just the established blue-white control decks of old. And I think many old blue-white freedom blockers players, or whatever you want to call those old decks, could jump ship over to this new flavor of control, or maybe even continue playing what they have been. But this is definitely a welcome flavor or addition to blue-white control's arsenal, I feel.
Absolutely. And if you're one of those players that you really want a deck that will reward you for correctly sequencing your cards and managing your resources, the ceiling on this deck is insane if you are just better than your opponent.
All right, so we have talked about the protagonist side of Unicorn Gundam, but let's talk about what is not known as Neo Zeong, but Neo Zeong. What is Full Frontal's side of Unicorn doing this set, Fulminatus?
Okay, so if you're looking at the deck list on screen, you are immediately confronted with the fact that this is a green-red deck, and by green-red deck, I mean this is a red deck that is running 4 copies of Charzaku 2 and nothing else. And there is a very simple reason for that. This entire deck is built around Neo Zeong. And why are we built around Neo Zeong? Because this is a level 9, 8 cost, 6/7 that has one of the most bonker lines of text that is printed on a Gundam card. Anytime that you play a Neo Zeong unit, you just ping for 3 damage. It's an improved technique on every one of your units. It also has a very impressive second line of text that says, when linked, all your units are Neo Zeong. So if for some reason you were out of archetype and you get a full frontal on this thing, everything's in archetype now.
Wow.
This leads to a card that has, frankly, an insane amount of value on it. However, having said that, it better, because at level 9, 8 cost, we are now in the realm of whatever card you're playing needs to be winning the game.
Yeah, so that's a very explosive card. Represents a huge ping. Oh yeah, by the way, it's just a 6 AP, 7 HP card.
Yes,
so it's
it is a
huge
6/7.
Stats, right? Yeah, it's the meme, right? Okay, so I'm a skeptical observer. I'm seeing you try to sell this card to the live internet audience of the lovely Side 9 viewers that are watching this video. Okay, cool. Now riddle me this: how are we getting to turn 9? How are we actually being able to resolve this card over the course of a game? How are we doing it?
We are getting to turn 9 the same way every red control deck is getting to turn 9. We are packing as many commands in here that say shoot a thing as we can.
So we see that in 4 copies of Close Combat, 2 copies of Battle of Aces, 4 copies of Improved Technique. Beyond that, we have overall ping, reliance on the Rebulula.
I'm leaving that in.
Relula base. We have.
So Relula gives us a ping 1. Haman pings when she's played. Marita pings when she swings. Kshatriya, my beloved, is doing our wide pings. We're even on Gira Zulu guards type to get 1 ping. Oftentimes, I would say okay, now we're overcommitting to it, but this is actually one of the few decks where I'm going to be honest, you need to have that level of outgoing damage to make absolutely sure that nothing is connecting with your face until you can get Neo Zeong out.
We also have 2 copies of Starter Deck Sinanju because I think it is literally impossible for my co-host on Side 9 to not include Sinanju in a Zeon-based red deck. So here we go, we have that. I think it's a personal pet card, but of course you can probably defend its use in this deck in particular, right? Which is just, I suppose we're just playing full frontal anyway, so why not, right?
What else are we playing on turn 6 in this deck?
Yeah, exactly. The only level 6 card in the entire deck. Ivy, you got me there. So overall, yeah, a whole lot of fun. I'm sure that you definitely feel the excitement of just going up in levels, getting that resource every single turn, and being able to deal with your opponent's cards on a 1-for-1 basis. Of course, a pretty recent direct comparison that you could make is, I guess Dandy's top 16 finish at one of the more recent regionals, playing the Banshee control, popularizing the red-blue Banshee control in set 3. So definitely a lot of similarities there. But overall, just having the ability to ping widely and ping efficiently and
ping bigly.
Ping bigly at the very, very end of the game, I think can definitely do a a lot. And it's actually really funny, coming up with things to say about this deck, because I think this is probably like the biggest one-trick pony of the video. But I mean, the pony's really cool though. Like the pony is awesome.
It's a really good trick.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we're making fun of the deck. There actually is a level of competency in this deck. This is not just, we're not just full blown on co-power. It's just the way the deck works is honestly pretty straightforward. You are just stalling till you get a Neo Zeong out into play. And then once you get one Neo Zeong, like any units you play behind it can just absolutely clear out your opponent's board without going sideways. So then you have pinged down their board without turning your unit sideways. So they just start going sideways at shield. And of course that just leads to an environment where the card advantage is extremely one-sided, and the deck needs to work that way because since we're so deep on red, we aren't drawing cards or anything like that. So it really does become all in on we commit to just trying our best to make sure our opponent doesn't have cards either.
Yeah, and of course you make the point like, we are not memeing on this strategy. Ping is, as we know, is just one of the best things to be doing in Gundam Card Game, and it turns out if we're able to have units that also ping, clearing their cards while also having our units stick on the board, we are just getting ever so closer to the big Neo Zeong play and being able to just close out the game that way. Because again, as you aptly point out, if we're able to see this card resolve and do the several ping 3 play, then I think the game's just over at that point. Everyone can just pack their bag, sign their match slip, right, and move on with their life.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to think about Neo Zeong as a card. Neo Zeong will absolutely, if it gets played, it will win you the game. It's the getting there is the real question, because again, he's not hitting the board any time before turn 8 if you're going second. And so he is the win condition, and everything else in the deck needs to basically centralize of how do I get there, and then once I'm there, how do I just make sure I'm playing stuff to make sure he pops. And that's a huge part of the reason why the deck is entirely centered on being Neo Zeong itself, because I want my Neo Zeong to be procking stuff even if I don't have it linked to a full frontal.
Yep. And of course I have your little notes right in front of me. I'm going to ask you how confident you are on this deck, but you also mentioned that you think no one's really going to play this deck. Why do you think that's true?
The biggest reason I think that this deck is going to not be played is I just think there are other, for lack of a better way to put it, more interesting things to be doing, decks that are a little more balanced in how they approach the game. This is borderline all eggs in one basket. It's slowing the game down to a crawl until you get into your Neo Zeong, at which point you just stop your opponent from having cards by playing units. And so due to that being really straightforward, this deck is likely going to fall into kind of a feast or famine dynamic where you can throw enough spanners in the works to make sure that your opponent doesn't get their game plan off the ground before you start just absolutely blowing their cards away, or you don't and their deck is just kind of gonna run over you because you're not generating card advantage and you aren't effectively one-for-oneing them with your kill spells.
Yeah, in fact, we were so desperate for card advantage that we had to put in a whole second color in this deck to get a shred of it. So there we are.
Yeah, it turns out that Charzaku 2 just being able to be a body on board for the purposes of trading with some early units and replace itself became extremely relevant.
Yeah, I think this is another case of just another new booster, another just weird / experimental thing that you could be doing within Gundam Card Game. And it turns out that it's actually pretty good. So, of course, definitely a welcome addition to just the variety that we see within the game. I'm looking forward to this one for sure.
Absolutely. I cannot understate landing a Neo Zeong will win you the game. God forbid you ever be in a scenario where 2 of them live on a board and every time a Neo Zeong unit gets played, you're now shooting something for 6.
Ping bigly.
So, of course, with Neo Zeong, we are full in on our booster's new gimmick. However, I'm not the only one who has been cooking in the kitchen when it comes to gimmicks. I think we have potentially the biggest gimmick deck we've ever seen in Gundam, but the real question is the gimmick good? Why don't you tell us, Reala?
Okay, so we have a new archetype that is technically a rebranding of an old archetype. They half-cooked White Academy in the kitchen. And then, of course, we got an announcement a few months ago that was like, oh yeah, by the way, in Gundam Card Game Set 4, your Academy units are now going to be green. We had no idea what that meant. Did that mean that they're going to reprint the old White Academy units and make them green? The answer is no. This is actually a brand new archetype called Dohna Fold that relies on the EX resource in Gundam Card Game. Now, I know what you may be asking. Okay, well, the EX resource is not a guarantee for every single game. So we're starting at a point where in order for this archetype to work to the highest extent that we can have it be, we need to go second. So you need to win the die roll. So we're at 50% odd to have that EX resource early in the game. Of course, there are ways to get the EX resource. So we have Gunvolve here. It is a level 3 2 cost with 3 AP and 2 HP. It says when destroyed during your turn, if you have another Dohna Fold unit in play, you place 1 EX resource. Okay, thank God. We have an ability to place an EX resource if you go first. We also have 2 copies of Wing Gundam
We
Bird
did
Mode.
it.
So we have ways to get the EX resource if we didn't previously go second. So that is first worry out of the way. Now we have a couple other secondary worries that we then need to talk about, right? So basically this deck is revolving around our ability to play command pilots, basically as commands.
Gun devolving even.
Gun-volving even, that have the Dohna Fold trait. So we have 2 of them. We have Witches from Earth, main or action timing. We choose a friendly Academy unit, and then reduce the next damage it receives by 2. But if you play the EX resource to play this card, it is reduced by 4 instead. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So we have, if we play the EX resource to do it, we're basically getting something akin to a unforeseen incident, but slightly more because we get to reduce it by 4 instead of reducing it by 3. Okay, cool. We can accept that. We also have Indiscriminate Violence, which is on main. We get to choose a friendly Academy unit, and during the turn, you can choose an active enemy unit with 5 or less AP as its attack target. And then, of course, similar text there. If we use an EX resource to play this card, you get to choose 1 to 2 friendly Academy units instead. So it gets to multiply, basically, where you get that ability to attack into active units twice. Okay, so these are commands. And one thing I always like talking about when it comes to commands is that as a command, if you're playing a card to activate an effect, you need to be getting at least 1 card's worth of value for 1 card. Unfortunately, these don't quite fit the bill for that standard definition of quality that I like to look for. So we then have to start looking for a very specific piece of synergy, and thankfully we do have it within this deck in Gundam Lifrith So there's a level 4 3 cost with 4 AP and 3 HP. It says once per turn during your turn, when you play and activate a Dohna Fold command card using an EX resource, we get to draw 1 card. Okay, thankfully we now have the ability to play these commands, and like, sure, we may be getting less than 1 card worth of value for the command, but we get to refund.
But we get our card back.
We get our card back, so we're up on the deal. Okay, this is, like I said in my little description here, this is the world's greenest Rube Goldberg machine because you have to set up the Gundam Lifrith to actually accrue value off of it and actually have it, you know, move and do things. Okay, cool. So now we're at a baseline to where we have these Dohna Fold commands. We have ways to set our EX resources down. We get bonus effects by being able to use them, and we get bonus cards by being able to use them. All right, awesome. Let's talk about some of the other Dohna Fold cards that we are working towards. So our next step up, because we were at level 4 before with Gundam Lifrith we now have Gundam Lifrith Thorn, which is a level 5 3 cost, 4 AP and 4 HP. It has Breach 3 naturally, you know, so of course, you know, Breach, good keyword. You get to be able to start swinging at shields while also swinging at the opponent's units. So you're definitely playing double duty when it comes to that. But it says during your turn, when you play and activate a Dohna Fold command card using an EX resource, you can pair that card from your trash with playing units with Gundam Lifrith in its card name. So that's important. That's why we are playing the, you know, regular white Gundam Lifrith as opposed to the new flat, you know, from the set, because we have the name synergy with Gundam Lifrith. But basically, we get to add a little bit of extra stats to our Gundam Lifriths by playing and activating those with EX resources. So we have the original Gundam Lifrith.
And it is worth noting, we could do stuff like link them.
Yes, yeah, very important to note. So the Gundam Lifrith Thorm is a link with Noria Danak, and then the Gundam Lifrith is with Sophie. So basically, Witches from Earth pairs or links with Gundam Lifrith and then Indiscriminate Violence will link with Gundam Lifrith Thorn. So yes, those cards could then start being active basically immediately. Of course, we have Breach, so they kind of pair well with the cards that we are linking them with. So Gundam Lifrith is your value engine. You want to protect it and maintain it, so you want to, you know, be able to lessen the amount of damage that is being dealt to that card. And of course, Lifra Thorn is a breach card, so you kind of want to go aggro. You want to be able to attack the opponent's active units. So yeah, we have some combo plays going on here, and that's pretty solid. Again, you set up the Lifra you go into the Lifra Thorn on the following turn. Okay, cool. Now we're at level 6. What are we building towards? This is our big bungus LR of the set Gundam Ferric. So it's level 6 4 cost with 5 AP and 4 HP. We have breach 5, and then during your turn, when one of your other academy units receives damage from an enemy, you place 1 EX resource. Hey, look, we have a late game way to play EX resources. So hey,
we now have a way to repeatedly make EX resources.
What we were worried about in the first place, oh, hey, look, we're good. We can do this all the time. And so, you know, this whole entire section, I understand this is like probably the most jokey that we've ever been on Side 9, but I think it's very important to highlight just the idea in the design space that Bandai is approaching this archetype from. It's pretty cool. It's a combo-centric archetype. We have, you know, real plays, real synergy. We have the links with the Gundam Lifriths. We have the ability to draw multiple cards or accrue more value with your Dohna Fold commands. Everything is wonderful about this deck on paper. I think the problem is when you boot it up in Wingtable or MSA, you try to play real games with it.
Yeah, the problem is that when you're reading the text on all of the cards, the actual like synergy level between these cards seems nuts. Like the amount of return that you get, you know, if you have your and your Thorn in play, then you play Indiscriminate Violets. Now your and your Thorn can attack active units, so you can take advantage of the tempo swing there. Your Thorn has breach, so this is extremely powerful because you're not even giving up shield pressure, and because Thorn is in play, your Indiscriminate Violence goes straight from the trash to linking the Thorn you just played, so you're good to go on that, and then you get your card back because procs, right? That sounds nuts. That is also, I need 3 very specific cards.
Yeah, but of course, you know, that's not to talk about if the opponent just has a really, really good aggro opener. We have some early blockers to try to stem the bleeding against them. We need very specific cards going into that. I mean, I guess we could play Overflowing Affection if we really wanted to, you know, secure more combo-specific lines, but then that also means we're not as resource efficient earlier in the game, and you know, we have to dig for those pieces earlier and like spend some time doing it, so we're like at a loss on tempo. So it's like, yeah, it's really tough for sure. You know, some other key cards to mention, we've basically covered basically all of them at this point, but Soleta Mercury has a way to make an EX resource if you don't have one at that point in the game. So once you like play and activate one of your Dohna Fold commands and you don't have an EX resource, you get to make one. You have 2 Gundam aerial rebuilds. One of them's more as a consistency piece, which is late game, which is kind of a head scratcher why we need a consistency piece late game, but you know, sometimes it actually does help you get that last little bit of push. And then of course everyone's favorite Gundam card game set to Duel Impact Gundam aerial rebuild, which has high maneuver and then gets blocker if you have former command crash. So that's everything that kind of ties this deck together. And then of course we have a link for Gundam Ferric. Elon Ceres, which allows you to choose one of your academy units, and then the battle damage that this unit will receive is dealt to that unit instead. So you combine that with the once per turn ability of Gundam Ferric, and you have your big breach boy that isn't taking any damage by itself. It's being allocated to somewhere else, and then, you know, of course one of your other cards is being, you know, dealt damage, so you can then get to place that EX resources. So overall, you know, it has a synergistic loop there that is more beneficial for you playing towards your victory. And of course the problem I think is mainly just consistency with this deck. I think this is probably a rogue deck at best. It may be able to sneak into the top spots. Of course, you know, love the name of rogue decks in card games in general for being able to do that. But, you know, of course, if you draw into your perfect curve and you get exactly the Dohna Fold commands that you need, and like you just like roll second, so you don't even have to worry about creating that EX resource for you over the course of a game, this deck definitely has a lot better of a time. But of course, you know, we are in Gundam Card Game. We have a pretty decent mulligan, but it's not the most consistent thing in the world, and sometimes we're just not going to get the specific pieces we need for this deck's green Rube Goldberg machine to get going. And unfortunately, I think that that's going to be happening in more games than not. So that's where the weakness of this deck really lies.
Yeah, it's funny because this is one of those decks that, like, when you're theory crafting it and when you're thinking about the deck on paper, you're like, this deck is awesome. This is just going to be great. And then, as you said earlier, you sleeve it up, you shuffle it up, you put it in the sim, and you go, oh wait, I drew my cards in the wrong order and this deck actually does nothing now. And that's just a really bad feeling, because there's I am playing on curve. Turn 3 Gundvolve, turn 4 turn 5 Thorn, turn 6 Ferrict, like feels fantastic. And then you look at your starting hand post mulligan where you have an 8 command deck where your commands are synergy pieces, and you go, I have 4 in my starting hand, I'm going to just die by turn 3.
And that's just them breaks sometimes. Yeah, if Dohna full new Green Academy. I'll give him this. It's more interesting than whatever White Academy was doing, which was just like soft AP minus synergy plus soft unforeseen incident synergy ? So hey, it's getting points in the uniqueness department.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, we clown on it a little bit, but this also genuinely feels like one of those decks that they just give it exactly one consistency piece. Like we get a Dohna fold command that is just a filter, find whatever piece you need, and suddenly this goes to the moon, right?
Yep. And then maybe if you use an EX resource to activate the Dohna fold command, then you could look at top 14 or something. I don't know. They can kind of get a little bit crazy with it, especially when it comes to consistency, because that's the main thing that this deck is like. Speaking of decks that are interesting, because we just talked about Dohna Fold, I think that Fulm has had an absolute field day with this one, because this is a deck that really incentivizes brewers to put on their thinking caps and think about all the different cards in Gundam Card Game and how to best use this big dummy LR turn A Gundam with the coolest mustache I've ever seen in my life. Fulm, tell me how you built this deck.
So the guiding ethos of this deck is, I think First Strike is a good keyword. No, really, that's the entire ethos of this deck. I went with, how do I get as much First Strike as possible? Now, I realize that this looks like I have Pepe Silva'd my way into making the most discordant pile you've ever seen. What is this red CB doing here without the green CB counterpart? Where's all the white synergy for turn A to abuse? And my answer to that is, have you seen these keywords? Why is Kyrios here? That says First Strike. Why is Union Flag Custom here? That says High Maneuver. What is G-Quux doing here? That's our suppression card. And so the way that this deck plays and the way this deck really pushes for game is, we're going to use our handful of low curve cards. We've got our Flat Militia, and we've got our Gundam Exia as anti-aggro. We will even throw a Kapul to the wolves if we need to. And it just takes that little bit and it opens the door just wide enough for you to start playing Kyrios Transams, and Turn A Gundams that all have the keyword First Strike on it, and you just start killing your opponent's cards without losing yours. And you only need to do this a handful of times before you do make a resource gap that your opponent just cannot keep up with.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to me, because especially I love the ability that our opportunity cost is not that high. I think arguably the highest opportunity cost is playing Graham's Union Flag Custom, because there's not a whole lot going on, except for natural high maneuver, which sometimes can just like win you the game for sure. But I would imagine that's absolutely
an overflowing affection target.
Yeah, I was about to say that's like our first thing on the overflowing affection list to try to get rid of. But outside of that, having a relatively high opportunity cost, Kyrios, if you can get the Hallelujah Haptism link, really, really good card. And it's funny too that you don't even need heavy amounts of CB for this card to actually scale, because you're at 5 you're at 5 AP already, because it counts itself as far as I know into the overall AP total for Kyrios, which is good. And then of course we're just playing like other pretty good cards like G-Quux Omega Psi Combo. We were playing this in Starter 09 Minerva Squad. Like, it's completely serviceable card. It sees itself in a lot of different control lists. And so I just like the ability to have your Turn A Gundam as kind of a wacky, radical, zany LR card. And then you just kind of are playing good cards in conjunction with that, and then you're able to just like absolutely sweep if you're able to get to. Have you been able in testing to get the full entire keyword suite? Like, have you been able to get High Maneuver, First Strike, Breach 3, and Suppression? And I guess technically Blocker 2, even though it doesn't really count for much in this case.
It depends what you mean by acquire those keywords, because yes, I have had the full suite of keywords available to me in several games. However, that is with the assist from reaching into my opponent's trash to borrow some of their keywords.
Right, and of course, yeah, that's a very important errata that happened to Turn A Gundam most recently. The original reveal talks about your trash. It's actually referring to both trashes as well. So sometimes you can get even more powerful from what your opponent decides to bring to the table as well.
Yeah, every once in a while, you'll watch your opponent throw away a breach and you'll be like, yeah, I'll have that.
Cool. Thank you for that. Maybe they accidentally throw it away with overflowing affection without thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Or oftentimes, because several parts of our low end are playing stuff like flat or our Gundam Exia, your opponent isn't entirely prepared for you to just drop a turn A.
Yeah, it's something that's not immediately obvious at the jump.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I really want to bring attention to before we really get into the breakdown of the units of the deck is our base Wilgum. This is such an interesting base. One, obviously, 7 HP base. We love bases with big butts. Of course, it comes in and damages itself immediately. We're still paying 1 for a 5 HP base, and that's standard rate. However, because we do have just enough units that have these main timing costs, Wilgum can wind up being a 7, 9, on the high end 11 HP bases, and that just winds up being insane because that stops stuff like a conga line of 2122s cold.
And of course, you combine that with your opportunities to have first strike, and sometimes it feels like this deck can just have an impenetrable wall where it's like, okay, well, my units have first strike, they aren't going anywhere. My Wilgum is still staying on the board, it's not going anywhere. Try me, try me, opponent. I'm going nowhere. Or
oftentimes what happens is you put your opponent in a position where they're like, okay, cool, I need to get something that has a ton of AP on the board right now to one-shot your Wilgum. So that way I don't have to deal with the fact that it keeps living through these turns. And you go, okay, cool, you gave me a target that I really want to first strike.
Yep. Sometimes life gives and life takes in that way. So you talked about wanting to go into, I guess, just the units itself of this deck. What do you think are like the key highlights of just the unit spread in this deck?
So 2 units that I want to draw immediate attention to, and I think you're going to wind up seeing these units a lot across a lot of decks, are Red Gundam Exia and Red Gundam Dynamis. These are interesting units because I like to make the joke that we have command pilots. These are command units. What Gundam Exia is it is a stealth stratagem strapped to a body. Now, stealth stratagem targets 2 AP and this targets level 2, but the way that both of these are used winds up being the same. Yes, it has a 2-1 body. It will get blown out by getting pinged by a Barbatos Adapt, but it does have the advantage of usually you will get to just kill a 2-1-2-2, so the worst case, you've eaten a ping and you're still going 1 for 1 on a card that never even got the opportunity to swing. And then Gundam Dynamis has a similar thing going for it, except this is a 4/4 that comes with a close combat staple to it. And this is really, really valuable because it means that it almost has a quasi baked in link. It is a unit that you can drop on the board. Sure, it's going to come down rested, but it can influence the board immediately. And when you're playing these decks that really need to like arrest tempo and stop your opponent from killing you, being able to have immediate impact on the board is so important. I mean, that's the whole reason that we put so much value in blocker, is that by nature of how blocker works, it immediately affects the board this turn cycle.
And in an ironic twist, it's very possible that Gundam Dynamis here, entering and rested, isn't even a negative, because what if you wanted to give the opponent an opportunity to start board clearing instead of going face because you want to protect your shields for as long as possible, right? And you're then introducing the ability for the opponent to make a different choice, and if they choose incorrectly, then it actually may turn out in your favor in the long run in the end. So it's like, cool, yeah, might as well just go ahead and do that, especially if it's tacked onto a pretty powerful effect in the first place, right?
They play something that's strong enough to tangle with a 4/4, and you go, okay, cool, next turn I'm going to first strike that.
Right. And of course, these are both CB units as well, so it's like, if we really want to aim for the sky and having Kyrios strike down first strike, really, really high HP amount. Of course, we talked about, Unicorn Gundam Norn destroy mode earlier in the video, then, you could just go ahead and do that. If you have the link plus any other CB, we get up to 7 AP here.
Yeah, and it also comes with a secondary benefit of, because they have the CB trait, every once in a while you do high roll a bit, and when you get a kill with your Hallelujah, you check top, it's a Gundam Exia, so not only did you kill something, you just went +1.
So overall, I think we've been over most units in this deck, but of course we have another turn A Gundam that has blocker. Let's go over this one real quick.
Rare Turn A, I think, is just such an interesting unit. It's also funny because it's actually the reason that we're running Warren. For what it's worth, the LR Turn A Gundam doesn't need to be linked to do its deal. So you could literally just pay 1, get your +1 AP, get your first strike, and you're off to the races. You don't even need to pair it with a pilot. But what the rare turn A lets us do is 1, it's a body with blocker. This is never a bad thing, but that blocker keyword is more just gravy. Instead, we're here for its link effect, and that is during link at the end of turn that you've paid 1 or more for one of your other militia or Diana counter units effects. You can choose one of your militia units, read turn A Gundam, and you set it as active. This allows it to persist over multiple turns and continue cashing in that value. And this is where turn A's ability to toolbox really starts to come into effect, because as it lives multiple turns, yes, I've built the deck from the ground up to abuse it getting first strike most of the time. However, as your trash gets bigger and bigger, you start running into the scenario of you go, okay, cool, because you haven't put up enough resistance, because I've first struck you enough, I'm just gonna take suppression this turn because I can get my turn A to connect, and because I did that, it's gonna go back to active next turn, and now you have to spend resources to do something about it. Or would you pass turn back to me? I'm gonna do it again.
Such huge disrespect. Oh my gosh.
But funnily enough, I feel like this is a concept that you are quite familiar with, having played your fair share of blue-white aggro and abusing people using Union Flag custom.
Yeah, you just say like, okay, cool, stop playing the game. Like, it's over for you, buddy. The game is done for.
That went active and it's threatening to you, so good luck.
I still want to play more blue-white aggro in this meta. I think it would probably still compete. So, definitely one of my favorite decks in the game.
And then I do want to take a moment and we're going to talk about Kapul. I don't think anyone is super excited for this card. However, looting on a 1-cost effect is generally pretty good, and it has real stats, so we get a little bit of the Choo-Choo's Jimmy Trainer going on here, but it doesn't immediately fold to the first adapt it sees.
Yeah, in fact, it only folds to an improved technique, and they gotta pay 3 costs to deal with a 2-cost unit. So hey, they go resource negative in the deltas. Hey, look, improvement for sure.
But again, the primary ethos of this deck is just first strike is a good keyword. It absolutely will clean people out on value. So we're just gonna use first strike as many times as we possibly can.
First strike is a good keyword, and then in parentheses, oh yeah, and some of these other keywords are pretty good too.
Yeah, it's sometimes suppression wins you the game.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, this deck is definitely really, really cool. It's cool to see, the brew happening with turn A Gundam, because I'm sure that this was a big head scratcher to a lot of people seeing this reveal in the first time. And this is just, of course, one of the ways that you can use its ability to your advantage.
Now, we talk about weird decks, and of course, I just spent the past however many minutes talking your ear off about how you should step outside of archetypes and abuse a keyword. So what do we do if we have a deck where you have what is arguably a very strong and very scary unit, but it is chained to an archetype that we will say is a little bit meta challenged?
Yeah. So this is Vultures. All right, let's talk about the new LR. So we have Gundam DX, Gundam Double X. It has level 8, 7 cost, 6 AP, and 6 HP. It has natural suppression, so that's cool. That's sticking with our original Gundam X LR from Duel Impact. And then it says during pair and on attack, if you're attacking the enemy player, you can choose 7 Vulture cards from your trash, exile them from the game. If you do, choose one enemy unit / baits that is level 8 or lower and destroy it. This is basically the closest thing we have to unconditional removal. Unconditional removal in Gundam.
It goes sideways and kills a guy.
It just blows up a dude. Now, of course, the more attentive of you just now heard 7 Vulture cards and started to weep a couple tears, because if you remember, the Vulture cards from set 2, from set 3, not that good. And of course, from set 4, don't really have a whole lot of help when it comes to that. We got a few new tools and we can talk about those soon. But Vultures was an archetype that we just literally didn't talk about the last time that we did one of these videos, because we had the line in the script that said there's just most of the archetype is below rate. And so what Double X is trying to do here is make up for the lack of being on rate with this huge removal piece, which is cool. I mean, it's a really cool thing. It's like a command. It's decisive last resort on a unit that has suppression. You get to do a whole lot late game. The problem is just getting there. So,
well, and not only is it decisive last resort where it could just kill anything that's level 8, I mean, you can look at the scariest thing in the game that isn't like She Gundam or the new Neo Zeong and just be like, stop having that. But even if there isn't something that you want to kill, if your opponent has a base out, this is our first effectively triple breaker, because it's going to kill the base and suppression.
Yeah, a whole lot of shield velocity happening at that point in the game. Fortunately, it's at level 8. We have some cool new tools. So, of course, I could go over, kind of what Vultures is is doing at a macro level. But let's go ahead and talk about some cool specific play patterns here. So we have Jamil's Gundam X, which is a level 3 2-cost unit with 2 AP and 1 HP, and it says that during pair with a Vulture pilot, when it's destroyed, if it's your turn, you can return the unit's paired pilot to the owner's hand. So we need to find ways to fill up the trash for stuff, and we don't have a whole lot of in-archetype ways to do it. But now we have this cool little interaction where we can pair the Garrett Ran and Tifa Adil to the Jamil's Gundam X, to do our pilot effect, discard 1, look at top 3, you can reveal vultures, and then put the rest in the bottom of the deck. So you get to selectively put vultures into your discard pile, and then get your Garrett Ran and Tifa Adil pilot back into hand, maybe go for a link on the following turn with your Gundam X, your Gundam X Divider, and things like that. So you get to activate multiple instances of your pilot that does what your archetype wants to do, but you get to do it multiple times, multiple activations of that pilot for just the one copy of the pilot, if that makes sense. So we can fill up our grave at a faster rate doing that, but I mean, good lord, we don't really have that many good ways of doing it. We're putting in our Minerva base instead of Frieden, which is a unconditional mill 2. This one, it's good to get a little bit more draw predictability about it. You look at the top 2, you probably ditch whatever vulture is in there, or of course if it's 2 vultures, you pick the one that you want to be drawing on the following turn on top of the deck that way. So again, helps you get a little bit more velocity in your discard pile. Same thing with Overflowing Affection. We are splashing white into this deck to be able to get a little bit more velocity when it comes to the Overflowing Affection, to get more vultures in that way. So those are like all kind of our last ditch efforts to be able to get 7 vultures in the trash by level 8, because believe it or not, that's actually a condition that's like not the easiest thing in the world to get to.
Yeah, or at the very least, it's a very difficult condition to meet without just throwing your cards away.
Yeah, which believe me, there's plenty of doing that in this deck. Let's talk about another interaction here. So Esperanza is an interesting card. It says on deploy, if you deploy it from trash, you get to draw 1. So that's really cool. It has a really measly stat total. But we have a nil L, which during link, which it links with Esperanza, it says that when it deals battle damage to an enemy unit that is level 5 or lower, you get to destroy that enemy unit. So basically you do this little play pattern where you have a Gundam X Divider, and Gundam X Divider can revive the Esperanza for its cost. You get to draw 1. You can then put your pilot onto the Esperanza to then basically go on a kamikaze mission to then take out whatever it is in the way that you can 1-for-1 for before you do your big blowout finish with Gundam Double X. This is a cute interaction. You are getting your card back, so what would typically be like a 2-for-1 exchange with the pilot becomes kind of a, I guess a 1-for-1 exchange because you're refunding the card off the Esperanza play. So that's just another way to fuel more vultures into your trash and get there a little bit more. But I think, the really sad state of affairs with this deck is that every like quote unquote good play pattern here I'm talking about are like, it just feels like acceptable losses at the end of the day, because all you're doing is trying to build up to this Gundam Double X play. And these plays are cute, but they don't really provide the most value for you other than just like a means to an end, right?
Yeah, we run into a little bit of the Green Academy / Dohna Fold issue, where do you get all the exact pieces you need for your cute combo? Then yeah, you wind up going to the moon in value. Your X Divider revives your Esperanza, so that is already +1 because a card from trash to field is card advantage. And then because you deployed it, you get your card back, so now you're +2, and then you put your NLL on it to ram it into what is hopefully another more valuable linked unit, or at the very least paired unit, so you 2-for-2 on that. So even then at the end, your relative card advantage, you're still 2 cards up on your opponent.
It's also interesting to me as well, for being a trash-based archetype, the fact that the only card that allows us to revive things from the trash, because there's several things that get the bonuses when they're revived from the trash, like Esperanza and GX Bit. The only card that's able to do that for you is Gundam X Divider. And of course, Gundam X Divider was a cool standout vulture card that did, something pretty interesting. It was Awakened Power on a body, basically. But now we're not even in a position in this game where this is a unique effect, because we talked about Destiny Gundam at the start of this video. So honestly, if you aren't super tied to Afterwar Gundam X as a concept, or vultures as a concept, and you just like the general idea of being able to revive things, like, use your trash as a resource and things like that, we then have a archetype in this game that is a lot better than vultures in Minerva Squad that I would point you towards first, unless you were just really dead set in this idea of playing Vultures.
And while we clown on this deck because this deck is very conflicted in its identity and Vultures themselves are just generally below rate, we do want to be really clear in the fact that we do genuinely believe that Gundam XX is, at least in a vacuum, one of the scariest LRs they've ever printed.
It's a crazy card, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, being able to effectively deal 3 damage on a swing or just look at anything on the board, no matter how scary it is, to be like, yeah, it's just dead on a 6/6 that already has that much presence and it can do it repeatedly is just crazy powerful. Unfortunately, it is entirely hamstrung by having a bit of a pile beneath it.
Yeah, a bit of a pile might be a little bit of an understatement. But yeah, to everyone watching, this is probably one of the weakest decks that we featured in one of these every decklist videos. I think this probably rivals Age Copium from our Dual Impact video. I'm not sure which one is worse. Genuinely, I think this one might be, unfortunately. But it is. We got a new LR for Vultures. We wanted to talk about Vultures in some capacity, kind of a progress report, because we didn't talk about it in the last video directly. So that's kind of what we're doing. Still needs some help, I think, is the main conclusion here. Speaking of Age Copium, we have a couple side 9 staples, but I think the only one that's persisted for more than 3 videos is a progress report, is a status update on the Age archetype in Gundam Card Game. We featured in the last video. It's been looking a lot better. We're featuring in this video. It seems to be looking even better than it was last video. Let's talk about Age.
It's wild to me that I became the side 9 Gundam Age guy. I don't even like Gundam Age as a series, but I do like it as some cardboard.
Good cardboard. So what's new here? I'm taking a look at this deck list. It looks like we're dealing with a lot of the same stuff that we had in the last video. However, that's a new Penelope, right? What's going on?
Yep. So right next to ye old Penelope, we have new Penelope Flight Form, which is a level 6 5 cost, 3/5, so we're below rate on our stats usually for a 5 cost. But it does come with it an Anthem that gives all of your Earthfeds +1 AP, so in reality, it's a 4/5. That's a much better rate. And then on deploy, so the turn you play it, during that turn, when one of your Earth Federation units destroys an enemy unit with battle damage, so you fight and you win, you choose one enemy unit with 5 or less HP, and you rest it. So it is a condensed 1-turn O effect where instead of caring about everything having repair, it just cares that it's part of the tribe of Earth Federation.
That's pretty cool because it creates a little bit of a snowballing effect where it's like, okay, well, you're successful in one area, let's go ahead and set up the trade so your other unit can be successful in that area as well. So it definitely creates a situation where you can stop the board parity and have it turn around to where you are very clearly winning that board after the exchange.
It also comes with the advantage. One of the biggest issues with O is you start getting control so late because it's reliant on O hitting the board and you having something else to start working with it. Whereas Penelope Flight Form having something, at least one other thing in play as of turn 6 when it comes down is much more doable.
Right. And of course we have all of the standard Age stuff of yesteryear. Age 1 normal seems to just be getting to be a better and better card the longer that time goes on. It seems like we're finally cutting Flit from this deck. Did we do that last video? Wait, hold up. Was Flit cut?
Unfortunately, we're actually missing several Age staples. There's no Flit. We aren't building to a higher end or anything like that. But what the handful of Age units we do have that is really relevant is, one, they're green Earth Federation units, so they play into our Earth Federation tribal. But the other thing that they have is that they are links with Asamu that give us more value as we get into linking them. Age 1 normal lets us draw cards later in the game. Beyond that, it's just fodder. It does occasionally get us an EX resource, and we like to segue that into later Penelope to get our advantage back. However, the biggest thing here is it's just something to put on Asamu, and Asamu giving +3/+1 and Breach 1 is just such a huge tempo play. And as Earthfed moves more and more to just wanting to take tempo of the game and basically force that advantage through into your opponent's shields and just hold the board, winds up being just a really solid way to mid-range your way through the game. Like, it really can keep pace with a lot of aggro decks and put off enough pressure to stave off control decks. It's one of the few mid-range decks that genuinely has its own legs, as opposed to running into the usual issue that mid-range runs into with Gundam, where you aren't fast enough to really push to really pull your weight against control, but also you're slow enough that aggro just kind of starts outpacing you. So you wind up taking the weaknesses of both archetypes as opposed to striking the middle ground. But as we get into AgeFed and how AgeFed deals with tempo, the opposite is true. You are now good enough in the mid-range that you can look at both of the other decks and be like, there's a distinct band of the game that I am better than you at.
Yep. And it's so cool how this comes together for sure, because we are, as Fulm pointed out, we're on kind of the age lean engine. Who would have guessed in order to make Age good, we had to cut as many Age cards as possible from the list. But, of course, we're banding it together with the blue generic Earth Federation package. And it's kind of cool discovering that sort of thing for the first time, because it's not something that's, like, immediately obvious, but, like, you mash them, both colors together, both synergies together. It's like, oh, yeah, it turns out that this stuff works together to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And it's, like, really cool to find those little cool deck building things. And, of course, this is an extension of what you found out in the set 3 meta as well.
Absolutely. And it turns into the whole idea of, it winds up that this deck is way more competent at pushing forward into your opponent's board than you would immediately think it is, especially given how you read cards, because Age as an archetype reads as something that really wants to like accrue its advantage and ramp up, and in reality Asimu has flipped that on its head. Asimu says, hey, we're gonna link and we're gonna start fighting now.
And of course, we have to talk about the last LR that we have not yet talked about this video. We try to cover every LR in every set. This one seems to be kind of just, fine, we'll throw it in. But, let's talk about that Gundam Arc 78 last shooting in the middle there.
See, it's so funny to me that we've phrased it that way, because it genuinely, looking at it at one copy, it really just seems like, it is the diversity hire. It's only here so that way we could say it was represented. But I will say that is underselling it. However, the new Gundam RX-78, or as we will all colloquially refer to it, the last shooting, because it depicts the final act of the original Mobile Suit Gundam, is a very specific card. When it first got revealed and we saw that effect of during link on attack, if it's attacking an enemy unit, bounce its pilot, known as the best blue pilot in the game, Amuro Ray, everyone lost their minds, because that means that we are recycling Amuros. And that is undoubtedly a powerful effect. However, as of turn 6, that effect becomes less relevant, and we are using a unit that has 3 HP to do so. So this means overwhelmingly this Gundam winds up just being a missile to kill one thing, and you put the Amuro on it to give it the ability to link and attack that turn, and then you bounce your Amuro back, you rest its target and kill that one thing, and then you just go back to doing Amuro things as normal, and that winds up being less impact than you think it would be.
It's kind of just a 5-cost blue removal spell when you think about it. Because you get to rest the thing, like you get to swing into it. It's 6 AP, so clear most things. But outside of that, not a whole lot of stuff going on outside of that, because again, 3 HP is really not that high in this game.
Yeah. People in the know, this is the blue Gundam equivalent. It's a fireball.
Yep.
You are 1-for-1ing on this card, and that's not bad. Like, the way I present it, it makes it sound like it's bad, but relative to how this card first reads, especially being an Amuro link, it winds up being less useful than you think it would be. However, if you have a deck that needs it, and it will be very happy to go into that deck.
It's also one of those things where if you get RX-78 Link on curve, you're just going for it. It's not like you're going to be reserving a copy of Armor in your hand so you can do this value loop thing late game with last shooting. It's just not something that's necessarily feasible. It's something that you kind of just draw the Armor late game to do. It's not like you're going to forego your on curve RX-78 play to do it.
And then, of course, we have just a handful of other things that just wind up being the generic slot ins. Rezel's here because it has the good words on it. Delta Plus winds up just being an include here because it links with all 3 of our pilots, although very rarely are you going to put a lane on a Delta Plus, but it's there if you need it. And then, of course, the other big tech piece here, this is the first instance that we've seen to the base, is Jaburo. I think this, similar to last shooting, is one of those cards where when it fits, but it is not a card that every deck is clamoring to put in their deck, largely because, one, it's locked to AgeFed synergy, energy, and 2, we are resting our units in order to rest our opponent's units. However, this does create an environment where like our Gym 3s, our Age 1 normals that are unlinked, or even just, a Rezel that isn't in a good position for a trade can just be rested to open up a better target.
And of course, kind of like how I highlighted Devout earlier in this video, sometimes all you need is that 5 HP base that gives you a card back. But, if there is a deck to be able to use this card's ability to the best of its ability, it would be in a deck with a bunch of Earth Federation units, right? Like, it's just that this is the natural slot in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, all but 3 cards in this entire deck have Earth Fed printed on them.
That would be a show of resolve, right?
Exactly.
Cool. Love that.
Our pilots are Earth Fed, our units are Earth Fed, our base is Earth Fed. The only thing that isn't is our command, and that's because commands don't have traits.
Cool. So what's your read on this deck going to the meta? Of course, mid-range has been pretty well documented, or I guess instead of documented, pretty well debated in terms of like, oh, does mid-range have a place to exist in Gundam Card Game metas? This is probably as mid-range as it gets. How are you feeling?
It sounds strange because this is the continuation of another deck that was largely a mid-range deck going into a format where mid-range is more prevalent. So, colloquial knowledge would say, hey, this deck is getting better, this deck is relevant, right? And while this deck is absolutely a competent deck, and if you really, really like your Age 2 normals and you want a place to put them, this is their home, I don't think that this deck is going to be that popular of a deck, because as much as it doesn't suck at things, it also doesn't particularly excel at the things people really care about. And as we go into a format where more decks can lean into mid-range, I think other decks potentially have more explosive power in the range, or at the very least they better convert to the extremes. Like a mid-range deck that, sure, its power spike is in the mid-range, but it has a better early game, or a mid-range deck where the bulk of its power is still in the mid-game, but it transitions to a better late game. Whereas this is a deck that pretty much all of its power is largely constrained to the mid-game and is then at the mercy of how many times can you resolve Penelope in the late game.
Yeah, this deck just overall just feels very fair. I guess is the best way to put it. And of course, fair doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it's like what you're doing at every stage in the game is something that is, on rate and not necessarily bad, but it seems like this deck struggles to find those true breakthrough moments where it has like crazy tempo swings or like crazy advantage pulls that other high-tiered decks in Gundam Card Game are able to do. And so like if all you're doing over the course of a game is just the fair on-rate thing at every level and cost, and it's like, okay, well that can probably beat a lot of decks in the game, but can it beat high rolls of the best decks? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cleanly how it fits in. Is this a deck that I'm going to recommend to a ton of people outside of the people who are already interested in a concept like this? Not really, but I will absolutely maintain that you can do much worse than a deck like this.
Sounds good to me. Thanks for giving us our progress report status update on Age Not Copy Anderson. That's all we have today for the new piles of Gundam Card Game Set 4, Phantom Aria. Hopefully we've given you some ideas for new brews, or at least a laugh at some of our more hopeful deck takes.
Set 4 continues the trend of incremental change found in Gundam Card Game. While we do expect to see shifts in the cards being played, we may not see major shifts in how the game is played. But of course, our next main set looms on the year anniversary.
Strike be thy freedom.
And who knows if we'll be playing the same way when the Omen of the 5th set drops. We hope you'll join us for the analysis on that set too, but as always, we'll see you next mission.